All right, so hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on this Fireside Chat. We have another wonderful episode, but before we make a start, just do a few housekeeping. Please mute yourselves just so that there's no noise interference as we go. It's a fireside chat, so if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat function just so that we can, the Karina, who's our guest today, is able to see, I'm able to see, and any other person that wants to contribute is able to see. So we strongly encourage that you ask questions where you see the need to. Now, a bit about what we do here. This fireside chat is run as part of a series of activities that we undertake on the Founders Academy, which is an online community providing education and mentorship support to early stage businesses. It sits on a wider platform called Founders and Mentors. Again, that's a free mentoring platform for the pre-launch ecosystem. Now, we have some sponsors, the first being the William Factory Small Business Incubator, which is based in Tacoma. And they do sponsor us. They've been sponsoring this since we started. So we're very grateful to Tim Strager, who's the executive director of the incubator. Now, also, again, like I've said, it's part of the Founders Academy. So we do sort of support that from that angle as well. Now, today we have with us on the fireside chat, Karina. And Karina is an incubator manager in Tacoma. Tacoma is in Washington State in the US. So we're really glad to have her on the call today. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to you, Karina, introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Winifred, again, for having me on this. As Winifred mentioned, hi, everybody. My name is Karina Martia-Harris, and I serve as the program manager for the Tacoma Maritime Innovation Incubator. So before I kind of get started on what our incubator does down in Tacoma, I'll just go ahead and give you all a little bit of background knowledge about myself. So I actually do have a maritime background by trade. I graduated from the California Maritime Academy with a Bachelor of Science in International Business and Logistics. And it was through my experience at the Academy that I actually realized that I wanted to pursue maritime and logistics full time. So what our incubator does in Tacoma is that it actually goes hand in hand with the maritime industry. In Tacoma, Washington, there is a working class port that's easily accessible right in our backyard. And with that being said, we want to help entrepreneurs specifically looking to get into the maritime trade, clean tech, logistics, find the resources that they need in order to be successful. And how do we do that? Some folks may be wondering. Well, we understand that when startups or small businesses are first starting out, that office space, internet access, or a place where they can send packages, things like that, besides their home, may not be a cost that a startup can occur right away. So what we do is we provide office space free of charge for founders at no cost for a year. And throughout this year process, they also get access to mentoring from a steering committee, the Maritime Blue Network, and myself. And they also get access to networking events as well. And then if the founder decides that they either want to do the non-dilutive funding option route, such as grants or pitch competitions, or the dilutive option, which would be funding from an angel investor or a venture capitalist, we will actually help get them ready for that. So that way they have the education in order for them to be successful in that regard.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Karina. And I think it's quite interesting and helpful that you did explain what incubators do, because I do have some of my students joining on the call today, because I teach entrepreneurship at postgraduate level. So to my students who are studying a master's on international business, And we usually would explore the options of incubators and accelerators and all that kind of stuff. And we do have a very diverse set of students, so a lot of them coming from, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Africa, and all that kind of stuff. And in those countries, incubators are not very popular. So I think it will be helpful as well if you could sort of highlight what are some of the advantages. So you sort of clearly told us what what incubators do, but say you have a business, one goes through an incubator and the other doesn't. What do you think are some of the differences in the outcome?
Yeah, sure. So I personally believe that education is Filipino, and she instilled very, very early on that education is a gift that nobody can take away from you. And I strongly believe in this as well because an incubator specifically provides a safe space. um, Me and a friend of mine are actually hosting a panel on this topic too, but something that I've realized while helping entrepreneurs is that the startup journey or small business journey is not all rainbows and unicorns, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, there are failure rates that come with having a small business or a startup. So essentially, one an incubator essentially provides you that safe space in order to really kind of build and scale your idea to see if your idea will launch. Another thing, too, is something that I personally look for when it comes to helping entrepreneurs is that if they're coachable, because not all entrepreneurs know everything. And everybody has something to learn, whether if it's perfecting your pitch so that way an angel or a venture capitalist, if they ask you the pressing questions, such as who is your total addressable market, what do your competitors look like, and other factors like that, you will be ready to answer those questions. And then the last thing too is just like it takes a village to raise a child, it honestly does take a village for you to build and scale your business. And entrepreneurship can be a very lonely journey because for folks that aren't really immersed in the ecosystem, right, they might not understand that entrepreneurship sometimes before you get funding, whether if it's non-dilutive or dilutive, there might be times where you may not be able to pay yourself because you're working on building and scaling your business. And with that into account, if people aren't immersed in the ecosystem, some family members or friends might just say like, hey, what you're doing obviously isn't working right away, go get a day job, or or maybe you should give up on this right now, right? So an incubator also does really provide you that support system to where if you are struggling with something, regardless of what the topic may be, one, you can lean on your cohort for advice. This is why in our incubator in Tacoma, I strongly advocated for the cohort method rather than just submitting companies by bunches. So that way there's a bonding element. And in addition, from the bonding element, they could obtain advice and resources from not only just us, but from their cohort as well.
And that's a very, very comprehensive and wonderful answer. So I think sort of really clears out on what business incubators are and the role and just really their importance generally in the entrepreneurial journey and sort of touching on that having a cohort, having people to lean on to draw inspiration from it because like you said, the entrepreneurial journey is a very lonely one. So it's always good to have this group of people that that you can sort of go to or ask for advice or just have a chat with about their experience and just get some guidance and direction from that. So I think that really makes a lot of difference. Now, normally we'll start from the angle of, a bit about yourself, background and all that stuff, but I just thought it was going to be very important to clarify what incubators are and the roles that they play. Now, when we think about you, Karina, I know you're born and bred in Tacoma and you're now working in Tacoma. So do you just want to take us back to your early years and think about where the inspiration for the maritime came from, logistics, all that? Did you have anyone in your family that had that kind of experience that inspired you to be where you are today and who you are? Just some introduction, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So because I'm from Tacoma, right, we would see all the time, and I grew up in Browns Point, so I would see big container ships pull in and out of the port all the time. And a part of me was genuinely curious, like, okay, what are these big ships and where do they go? So then I actually had a very good family friend, and this family friend, their parent or their dad worked for the VA. And through the Veterans Affairs Association or the VA, there was this program called the United States Naval Sea Cadets. And what this program does is they expose youth to the Navy and all certain parts of the Navy or the military. Um, I always knew that I wasn't going to go to like the traditional college compared to my peers. I just couldn't figure out what it was yet. But it was actually through the Sea Cadet program that helped immerse me into maritime. Fleet Week Seattle, for example, is this big maritime slash Navy Coast Guard event that usually happens every year in Seattle, and a good amount of vessels will come in, and you'll get to talk to, as a sea cadet, we kind of got special privileges, and I got to talk to all different types of people. Some of them were academy graduates, and then they all explained, like, I went to the Coast Guard Academy, or I went to the Naval Academy, or some of them said that they went to the Merchant Marine Academy. Um, when I was 18, I'm sure some of you can relate to this. I didn't know if I wanted to commit to making a service academy commitment to where you would go to school. Some department would pay for it, but then in return, you would have to serve, whether if it was in the Merchant Marine, the Navy, Coast Guard, Army, or other branches. And I didn't know if that's what I wanted. So one of my godmother's nephew actually went to Cal, and everybody kind of made the consensus that Cal was the place that they saw me ending up. And it was ironic because he graduated in 2013, and then literally 3 years later, I actually attended my very first day at the California Maritime Academy. So it all kind of goes full circle. And then while I was at the academy as well, I got to intern at the Port of Tacoma. So that also gave me a bigger perspective of the port and how there were so many different parts that went into it. But I knew I kind of wanted it very, very early on.
And I think that's fascinating. Sometimes, or a lot of times, really, we do find out that the environment that we grow up does affect, who we become in future. So, I can really relate to the fact of you saying, growing up, seeing all these vessels and ships and just being curious about what's happening, what they're doing, and all that stuff. I totally understand what you mean there. Now, sort of going down that journey and, going to school in California, coming back to Tacoma, what was your inspiration to join Maritime Blues? So was there something about that organization? Did you always know that you wanted to be there? What exactly was it? Their culture, their values? What exactly drew you to that organization?
Yeah, so I actually graduated at a very lovely time. I graduated in May of 2020, so when everybody was starting their lockdowns and everything, and I really had to get creative, right, on how to meet people when I was a fresh graduate out of the academy. And, um, networking was completely different because it was all virtual rather than now where it's a combination of a hybrid model where there's some in person and some, that are still kind of virtual like we are today. And I had to work a transition job. And if any of you that are students on this call, a transition job is not necessarily a bad thing. So if you ever have to find yourself working a transition job, it is not the end of the world. I kind of thought it was. I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, all my friends are getting hired. I was like, when am I gonna get my foot into the door after the academy? Um, but at the time, I honestly thought that a port authority is what I really wanted because in addition to me being, somewhat close to the port almost every day in my life, my internship sold it. And then some of the classes at the academy also sold me wanting to work at a port authority. So while I was working my transition job, every day, I kid you not, Winifred, I would go to all of the maritime company sites that I either knew of or I was exposed to. And the Port of Seattle actually released this article about the Youth Maritime Collaborative. And the Youth Maritime Collaborative is actually a part of Maritime Blue. And what the Youth Maritime Collaborative does is they help 18 through 24-year-olds get their foot in the door by providing them hands-on work experience in the maritime industry. I looked at that and I was like, I think that this is perfect. However, because of my credentials, I was afraid that they might think that I was a little too overqualified because, compared to kids that are walking in versus me to where I have the academy background and the maritime background, I was like, I don't know if they're going to take me. So I put in an application and I was like, you know what? The worst thing that happens is I get ghosted. I don't hear anything back from anyone. Um, so I put in for the application and a few months have gone by and I was like, there's no way that I'm hearing back from them, which is fine, right? That means that that wasn't the organization that was meant for me. Little did I know. So as soon as I put that thought into my mind, it was actually the executive director of the YMC that gave me a call and said, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't get to a chance to check the applications because, the internship already started. And she was like, but because you have these credentials, I want to talk with you and, introduce you to some folks and maybe help you, get your foot in the door. So I met with the CEO of Maritime Blue, Joshua Berger, and then the executive director of the Youth Maritime Collaborative, which is Visa Ahoy. And they both liked what I had to offer, but at the time they weren't hiring. Um, Shortly after, a position with Maritime Blue did open, and it aligned with what I did at the academy, what I did outside of the academy to get me to that point. And what I really liked about Maritime Blue is that they gave a young person like me an opportunity. And sometimes when you're job hunting and trying to get your foot in the door, regardless of what industry you're trying to get into, that is always the hardest step. But once you get your foot in the door, the possibilities are endless. And in addition to me, right, I also help. in addition to helping entrepreneurs, I something that I am very passionate about is helping young people see the potential of the maritime industry. And in addition to seeing the potential, is helping youth kind of explore different career paths. And that is super, super important to me. And also, too, the aspect of sustainability is important to me as well, especially with the effects of the climate, right? As an example, Washington State has had a few summer days already where we've gotten to 100 degrees, and before that was never really common. So the fact that I get to combine sustainability and mentorship, whether if it's helping entrepreneurs or youth, is why I really like being at Maritime Blue. And also, too, the fact that I get to help the community where I grew up also means a lot to me, too.
Yeah, I think when you think about a career, you're always thinking about how can I contribute positively to the world that I live in, and I think you found your calling one way or the other. You found that, and it's really inspiring to see. And like I said, we would have quite a few young people in the audience as well. Those studying, those looking for jobs. So I think it's always good, to hear about your journey, the persistency, sort of going to every, organization in that industry, talking to them, seeing if there are any roles available. It does make a difference because sometimes it can be quite daunting, and people might feel that, maybe it's only me going through this, but to be honest, it's not. So it's good to hear that. Now, as we move on the conversation, we sort of begin to delve deeper into your role in the incubator. So you're the incubator manager, and we think about, you sort of told us some of the things that incubators do, things like, mentoring, organizing workshops, educating startups, and those kinds of things. Now, with that in mind, my next question is really centering around people that want to come into an incubator. What's the process like? How do they sort of make the decision to think, do I need an incubator or do I not? How do they decide on, should I join one or not? Say, for example, I know that the incubator you manage is specifically for the maritime industry, and it's sort of a unique industry, isn't it? So it will be very helpful to sort of educate people on how do they make that decision on whether to join an incubator or not. What's the application process like, especially with your incubator? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So, I will mainly talk about, our incubator in Tacoma. But the first piece of advice that I would like to suggest is that one, you have to see what it is that you are struggling with, whether if it's you needing financial advice or more connections into a certain ecosystem or something. You kind of have to look at where you're struggling and where you would need help, because the next point I want to bring up is, two, if you either have heard of other incubators in the area or if there's other entrepreneurial resources, my best recommendation is, after you figure out what you're struggling with, see what type of entrepreneurial resources are out there. And if so, what type of support would it help entrepreneurs with, and what type of resources that they offer. As an example, in Tacoma, what I really, really like about the Tacoma ecosystem is that it might not be as big as Seattle, which is fine. But what I do like is that what I've seen from when I first kind of got involved in the incubator in December of 2020 versus what the progress that we've made now, Winifred, it is so significant. Like, I love the fact that I've worked with several different partners to either put on events or, in addition to events, have them provide mentoring services to some of our entrepreneurs in the cohort. Because how ours works is sometimes founders will come talk to me after I've either one given a talk about our incubator program somewhere or at a networking event, something. Entrepreneurs will talk to me about their business. And if I think that there is a potential fit, that's when I would encourage them to put in the formal application online. We have an application. It isn't the most labor intensive because our overall goal mainly is to see if they have some type of connection to the maritime industry. If folks do not talk to me first, and then if they put in an application online, then that's when I'll kind of reach out and kind of talk to the founder for a meeting to kind of see if there's a fit. But if we think that there's a fit, what we'll do is we'll pass the founder on to a 5-minute pitch to our steering committee. And through that pitch, they have to talk about themselves, they have to talk about their business and what they're trying to achieve, whether if it's solving a problem or providing some type of service, something. And then after they give their 5-minute pitch, usually to the steering committee will have the opportunity to ask the founder questions. If I do understand that the industry that we're working for is kind of specific. So what I also like about Tacoma is that if um, an entrepreneur may not be the fit for our program, then luckily there's other entrepreneurial assistance programs like Tim's at the William Factory or Vibe with UW Tacoma that I can say, hey, while I think this founder is great, there may not be the resources on our end for us to help them. So that's why referrals and knowing the community is super, super important. Um, there and the only reason why we would not take a founder is because if there wasn't a fit, specifically with what we're trying to work on, we don't know if we would be the best person, especially me, to provide assistance for the founder. So if there kind of is no maritime or blue economy fit, I personally would rather refer them to somebody else that most likely would help them better than I can. But if entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs have come to me before and have asked for help or advice on certain things, and of course, I'm always happy to provide my input. I have a open door policy, and I can easily be found on LinkedIn or on Maritime Blues website. So if folks ever did want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to make a conversation.
Fantastic, thank you. And what I think is quite important there is sort of laying out the process, which will be similar to every other incubator. It's the same principle. Do we think that we have the expertise to support you? Because there's no need taking on an entrepreneur when the expertise is not there. So if it's someone that is totally out of the maritime industry, then the value add is not going to be that much. So you want to sort of have that in mind. So because one of the projects that I've been working on with Tim is the B project, which is building an entrepreneurial ecosystem focused on the Tacoma entrepreneurial ecosystem. And when you talk about the community-like nature in Tacoma, it's something that sort of comes out in the data that we've been collecting. And it's always important, I think, when you do these things, when you run, the incubator, it's always good to think to yourself, what's the culture within the area that we are operating in? So, what to expect from the entrepreneurs that come to you, that kind of thing. I think when you think about Tacoma, in comparison to Seattle, it's a much more community-like friendly atmosphere. So the people coming there might not be coming with, very, very tech based or heavily sophisticated, ideas. They might just be looking to improve the community that they live in, and that's fine. So I always do think it's good to have the the nature or the culture of the environment in mind when incubators are set up. It sort of helps you know how to provide the right services to people that come to you. So moving on, now my area of expertise is finance, and what I want to do is sort of get your own perception. At the early stages of our call today, you talked about the support that you provide to entrepreneurs that are looking for diluted or non-diluted types of funding. So if you want to just highlight on these two types of funding and how your incubator helps entrepreneurs to raise whichever they think would be more suited for them.
Yeah, sure. So how we at Maritime Blue define a venture scale company is that if somebody is solving a mass problem, as an example, with climate change, right, and with our ocean being polluted, one of our companies and our waters being polluted, one of our companies that we had go through the program is called Aquaga. And what Aquaga does is that they're more environmental remediation, but they take a water sample that has PFAS or a forever chemical in it because they realized that forever chemicals are in our environment and they're everywhere. Not only are they in our waters, they're in jackets, cooking pans, cosmetics, you name it. I'm pretty sure that you can find PFAS. And actually, the founders let me know that most likely you can potentially find PFAS in somebody's bloodstream already. So what they do is, they take the sample of whatever is PFAS contaminated, they'll put it through their patented technology, and then after that, the water sample will come out clean and will not have PFAS in it. So what we try to do is the joke is that I am everywhere, um, whether if it's in person, in the ecosystem, on LinkedIn. So what I personally do for our founders that go through our Tacoma program or any of our entrepreneurship programs is I will look for non-dilutive funding options or other opportunities such as pitch competitions. As an example, back in July, our incubator in Tacoma and Cabinets HR put on a pitch competition to where it included prizes, and that was more a non-dilutive funding route. But regardless of the route that you go, whether if it's non-dilutive funding options or the dilutive, which is through investors, is telling your story is super, super important because it's used when you write those grants. It's used when go for pitches to investors. And if you can't tell your story in a way that's captivating, effective, and gets your point across, people are not going to be on board with what you're doing. Because again, it goes with Tacoma being such a community environment. That is my overall goal of what I'm really trying to instill here is the community environment and the aspect. So for when it comes to the non or for the dilutive funding options, excuse me, for investors, what I personally will try to do is one, invite as many investors to either come to our events, or if I meet investors and if it potentially matches, if their portfolio potentially matches with some of what our companies were doing, I will go out of my way to make introductions for the founder to have with that investor. But again, the the best gift that I can give, in addition to whether if it's looking for opportunities for founders, is really setting them up for that pitch. Because I have to tell my story all the time to folks like you all and other speaking arrangements that I received. And in addition to me telling my story, I've also gone through the grant process, and a lot of it is repeatedly telling your story and the number one ways Because, right, if somebody gives you a lump sum of money, they're going to want to know what you intend to do with the lump sum of money. So I've gone through the process, and it was constantly me saying, our incubator is community based. We really, really thrive to use businesses that come from underrepresented backgrounds when it comes to catering or other vendors, things like that. So overall is telling your story is super important. And if you as a founder are not able to change your story and how you tell it to different audiences, that is something that you really need to emphasize on, because in addition to helping founders get ready for grants or dilutive funding options, I will also put our founders in front of different audiences, and I will give them various time links on how to tell their story. So sometimes I've said, hey, you only have 2 minutes to tell about yourself and what your company does and what an ask is. Or one thing that I really like to do is give back to the community, because I understand that without the support of my family, mentors, youth programs, and things like that, I would not be where I was today. So what I do is I have our entrepreneurs host local youth groups, and what they have to do is they have to have a hands-on activity that relates to what their business does. And what I'm doing there is that I'm testing them to see if they can tell their story in different methods and to people that do not know anything about what they're doing.
And I do really understand the importance of getting people ready for that pitch competition. And you sort of can look at a pitch competition like also just really summarizing a grant application in like 2 minutes. So either ways, the more you know your story and think about the various ways you can play or tell that story, it always helps you to be ready. So I know that I think it was yesterday I came across a post on LinkedIn from Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. And one of the things he said is if you're not able to communicate your business idea to an investor in 90 seconds, he said, I think, then that's a no-no. So I think that also sort of helps you to get ready for these kinds of situations when they do present itself. But it's always important. And I think it's also helpful to those in the audience that are thinking about, okay, I'm launching my business. There's no need to do it in isolation. So the style or how Karina is explaining what the Maritime Blue Incubator in Tacoma does, it's a similar platform or it's a similar system across incubators in any part of the world. That is what they're there to do, support businesses. And most times, you don't need to pay. For most incubators, you don't need to pay to join them. They're usually funded by the government or funded by universities or just philanthropic organizations or industry or trade centers or things like that. Well, moving on now, Karina, I'm just sort of mindful of time. We've got 20 minutes left on the call. Now, I do follow you on LinkedIn, and I see that you're very active in terms of networking, attending events, and things like that. And that's one thing I do encourage a lot of my students to do, to go out there and meet people and sort of put yourself out there and take those risks. And you just never know who you'll meet on their journey. So, do you want to tell us how you've sort of developed that skill to be able to sort of go to events, meet people? I know it's part of your job role to a large extent, but sort of initially when you started the journey, how did you manage the reservations of, it's not something that comes naturally to everyone. Certainly, I know it doesn't come very naturally to me. It's something I've had to put in a lot of effort. So again, this will be sort of targeted at people that are trying to build their network base. How should they do it? How, when they go to events, how should they approach people? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, I consider myself to be very extroverted for one, which I realize that not everybody is, and that is okay. Um, but throughout my time at the academy or as a sea cadet, I was always in leadership roles from very, very early on. So, how I developed that skill very early on, because a lot of it was me putting myself out there. And especially for me, being a woman, right, and a woman of color, my parents kind of instilled early on that sometimes, unfortunately, because of my background, that I would have to work 10 or 15 times harder than the average person because I am a minority and I'm a woman. However, I don't let that stop me though, because I believe that everybody has something to offer on the table. Me, for example, I kind of consider my strong suits to be like more ecosystem building and connections, while other people that I have met have a very, very technical background and they can just put something very, very technical together fast. And that is not me. That's why I tell my entrepreneurs from like day one, saying that if the program manager who is trying to help you doesn't understand what you're doing, this is going to be problematic, right? Because if I don't know what you're doing, how am I supposed to go advocate on your behalf what you're doing? So, with that in consideration, um, I always like to tell people, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And sometimes it helps if you start small and talk to one person at a networking event. Other times, some networking events may have breakout sessions to where the conversation will be easier for folks to start. Um, I have also been mentoring folks early on too. So I remember at the academy, specifically when I worked for the women's basketball team, I would kind of push the girls to do things that they didn't want to do, such as like attend the career fair, attend these networking events, because I said, right, you're trying to build your professional network. And in addition to building your professional network, you know, at the end of the academy route, regardless of what job or regardless of what field you studied in, what is the common thing among everyone? We're all trying to get jobs. So I instilled to go talk with people. And then sometimes in my job now, right, as a person that's very, very extroverted, I have found myself, telling our entrepreneurs like, hey, you want to get your message across to what you're doing in front of different audiences. So I better not see you just like standing around and not talking to anybody or not doing anything. You need to put yourself out there. And I know that's a scary feeling, right? I have gone into the room before being the only woman and sometimes being the only person of color, but that shouldn't stop anybody, regardless of what ethnic background or who they identify as is, because everybody has important perspectives to the table to bring to the table. So make sure, you're not afraid and you take advantage of every opportunity. One way that, especially for the students on the call, I highly encourage to get involved at what your at the current institution that you all are studying, whether if it's being like a involved in a club, or I personally am not athletically talented, but whether if it's, being involved with the sports team or being involved with different clubs, student government, something, get yourself in one of those, because that will really, really help build leadership skills.
Fantastic. I think that was very helpful, really getting people to put themselves out there. It's really a bit scary initially, but it can be done. So before we carry on, what I'll just want to say is, if you're based in the US, could you please type your name in the chat, because we have a separate giveaway. We usually would give $46 worth of snacks from the fully charged fully charged allergy-friendly snacks. So I just want to make sure I remember that well. Yeah, but please, if you're in the States, type your name in the chat. We usually have a separate spinner because the snacks are only available in the States, unfortunately. So that's why we have to give it to someone in the US. And it's sponsored by the William Factory Small Business Incubator. So we thank him for his generous sponsorship. Now, sort of carrying on, we're drawing close to the end. We'll be doing our giveaways very soon. What I'll just like to draw upon is you sort of highlighted the networking role, the funding role, that community role of incubators, and just why it is beneficial if you do have an incubator around you to join one. Now, in your workings with entrepreneurs, how do you advise them to get mentors? So I know that if you join an incubator, you will be matched most times with a mentor. Do you think having a mentor is important? What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. I think that having a mentor is super, super important because, well, with me, for example, I had mentors all the time that one would push me to my very, very best potential and would also help me realize the amount of work that I could achieve. And another aspect to that too is my former boss with Maritime Blue, Josh Carter. Unfortunately, he is no longer with the organization, but I learned so much from him in the 3 years that I got to work with him. So um, I will be honest with everyone on this call. When I first took the incubator manager role over, I had some very, very big shoes to fill because my predecessor, Nate Tolbert, not only was he involved in Tacoma a lot longer than I was, but he was also an investor. So there was an element, there was already a level up there that he could provide, which unfortunately I don't have investor capability. So through Josh's mentorship, I really, really learned what to look for in a pitch, for example, how to help entrepreneurs. But lastly, one skill that I would recommend to everyone on this call is don't be afraid to ask for help because I'm human. I will admit that I have made mistakes before and I'm not perfect, but it was through my ecosystem and the network of people that I really, really had to back me. And they caught me if I ever fell, just like an incubator would kind of, or a mentor would help an entrepreneur early on trying to figure things out. Having a mentor is super important because especially if they do have that entrepreneurial backing, they'll most likely be able to talk with some of the lessons that they've learned when they were either starting their business or, their startup or small business and the lessons that they've learned. And again, the education is the gift that keeps on giving. And a mentor can do so much, whether if it's helping you with learning lessons, connecting you with people. I really don't think that it's a waste of time to have a mentor. I think a mentor would really help look out for you and your best interest.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sort of highlighting those benefits there because few people, quite a lot of people do not know how beneficial mentoring can be, especially if you're going to be starting a business and say, for example, you come from a family where no one has run a business before. Several things could be playing, they might just think you're trying to be different and you might not necessarily get all the support you want. So it's always good to have that community, but also have someone that you meet on a monthly basis or, however often, usually a month or every 2 months, depending on the stage you are in the business journey, but it's always good to have that person that you go to when you need help and guidance and, they can sort of provide that back to you. So it's glad to hear you say those same things that I do really encourage entrepreneurs to do. Now, sort of going back to your networking comments there, I remember while I was doing my own PhD very early on in the journey, I used to sort of help my supervisor organize certain events. And he really used to tell me then he doesn't want to see me talking to my fellow colleagues. I should try and speak to people I do not know. And that's the whole point, isn't it? No matter how uncomfortable it is, there's no need speaking to people you know. You want to get to know new people and just build those connections and see where those relationships go. So thank you very much for sort of touching it on there. Now, as we sort of round up the journey, you're sort of coming from a position of working closely with entrepreneurs, seeing entrepreneurs come into the incubator and leave at some point. So you're sort of coming from a helicopter view, you sort of see how things are. What are some of the characteristics or skills, or go for skills, that you think some of the best people or some of the best businesses that have left the incubator, what are some of the skills that you've seen them exhibit that you think has really propelled them to where they are today? Do you have any specific skills in mind?
Yeah, so the number one thing that I would have to, of course, see is right the progression that the companies make from when they first started the program to where they are wrapping up the program. As an example, well, next week, um, I wish all of you were US based, specifically around the Tacoma area, but we actually are having our entrepreneurs live pitch to an audience exactly in a week from now. And seeing the quality and the level of pitches from when they first started the program to now is very, very drastically improved and much more different than, when the founder first started the program. In addition to the quality of pitches improving, I love seeing just either the overall progress that the founder has made, whether if it's getting non-dilutive or dilutive funding options. In addition to the funding options, it's really, really wonderful to see the entrepreneur's journey and how much they have grown, whether if it's building the connections, whether if it's getting that first non-dilutive or dilutive funding option, and then seeing also the level of confidence that grows in the founder is extremely significant. Um, One skill that I really, really look for again is the founder's ability to be coachable, because I've noticed that for the entrepreneurs that may not have the entrepreneurship background, and if they go into it with an open mind, they absorb and they learn so much. That is super important to me too, is, you know, a founder's ability to be coachable and to learn on the skills that, we at Maritime Blue have helped provide them. It's also nice too, right? Since I am very active on LinkedIn, as you know, and I have my own events that I put on for the incubator, but it's also nice to see like our founders put on their own events too, and them comfortably talk about their business. And that is super important to me because it shows a level of progress, right? And I'm glad, while I am sad to see the founders in our incubator program graduate and move on, I am happy to in a sense see them go. It is kind of a bittersweet feeling because, I get to, of course, just because they leave the Maritime Blue program, it does not mean that, their support stops. But overall, it's just a level of progress that the founder makes is super rewarding to see. And I have gone to some of our entrepreneurs events to fully support them after they graduate from the program. And we are also getting ready to onboard our third cohort, which is crazy to believe because it just seems like yesterday that we onboarded the second wave cohort, and exactly in a week from now, they'll be live pitching and then they'll be graduates from the program. So, well, again, it'll be sad for me, but I cannot wait to see the endless amount of opportunities that they will achieve after leaving the incubator.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you for that. What we're going to do now is we're going to do the spinners, our giveaways. There's a question from Tim. Sorry, I've just only seen it. So, Karina, while we do the spinner, if you want to just have a look, and then I'll do the spinner for the giveaways, and you can sort of use Tim's answer to that question as your closing remarks, please. So I'm going to share my screen now, and it's amazing the guest or the attendees on this fireside chat keeps growing. We're now at 59. I remember when, we used to struggle to get 10 people. So I'm very grateful to those that take their time to attend. We're now going to be doing the spinners. We're going to give out two £30 Amazon vouchers. I've tried my best to put in all the names I can see. I have 63 names on my screen. That's because some people have sort of dipped in and dipped out, but I'll put their names through anyways. I'm going to spin it 2 times, and then I'll let you know who the winners are. So we're going to spin. Okay, do the first one. So Rohit, we're going to take your name out. Okay. Now we're going to do this. So Rohit is the first winner. Rohit, I know Rohit is my student, so I'm going to send that to you. We're going to do the second one now. So Valerie, I'm going to reach out to you, asking for your email. Or Valerie and Rohit, can you please put your emails in the chat? And then I will reach out to you with the £30 Amazon vouchers. So now we're going to go to the American site. So we've said that we do give away $46 worth of snacks to, someone in the States. So just waiting for Zoom now. It's sort of going to have to bear with me. I'll pull it up again. Just need to switch screens. Okay. So Valerie, if you could please put your name in the chat, that would be great. Rohit has done. So we're spinning for the snacks. So Kirsten would be in touch, asking you for your address so that he can send over the snacks. So Kirsten is our winner for the $46 worth of snacks from fully charged allergy-friendly snacks. So I'm getting that mixed up in my head. But so over to you, Karina. Do you want to just leave us with some closing remarks, and then we'll round up for the evening, please?
Yeah, I think I will go ahead and tie in Tim's question as well. So overall, I think how the community can improve is that if we work together and kind of frame it in a mindset as collaboration over competition, because I believe that regardless of what incubator or accelerator program that a founder pursues in Tacoma, right? I believe that the more people see the ecosystem out here throwing or thriving, regardless of what the sector is, I think people will really start to see what Tacoma has to offer. What's really neat too, Winifred, is that an investor that I've been working very, very closely with has said Tacoma reminds him of what Silicon Valley started off as and how he's seeing it grow, just like how he saw Silicon Valley grow. And the fact that he said he wanted to stay here and make Tacoma his home and to really grow the amount of venture capitalist funding that there is in Tacoma is really neat. So just because a community might not be the biggest, it doesn't mean that um, we don't have anything to offer here. And if I encourage everybody at some point to come see Tacoma and the lovely startup slash small business ecosystem that we have here because it's very, very welcoming. Um, what's really neat too is I look for vendors all the time. And the fact that a lot of the vendors in Tacoma slash Pierce County are willing to work with me, whether if it's giving me a discount or always providing to the food accommodations because I always ask for a gluten-free and vegan option. Um, and the fact too that I can walk into local coffee shops and people know me, they know my name, they usually know what my preferences are for my drink. Um, yeah, come check out Tacoma. It means a lot to me, and I apologize that we're a little over time, but thank you, Winifred, for having me, and thank you for everybody for taking the time to listen to me and having me on this call. I really appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karina. And I really do agree with those characteristics of Tacoma. The research we've been doing in Tacoma sort of directly correlates with what you says, that community feeling, that sense of belonging. It does make a huge difference. And it's always good to know I am due to visit Tacoma very soon, so I will be in touch to let you know. But again, thank you very much, Karina, for your time. It's been a great pleasure having you on this call and just learning about the amazing work that Maritime Blue does in Tacoma, but also just knowing how entrepreneurs can benefit from incubators. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining the call today. We're very grateful for your presence. We've sort of overrun by 3 minutes, and I apologize for that, but we'll be in touch for the next fireside chat, and do have a lovely evening. Bye, everyone. Bye, Karina. Bye, Tim. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.